Hey guys, this is Dan with Gears and Gadgets. Thanks for tuning in. What do motorcycles, chickens, EVs, racing, drones, and TikTok have to do with each other? This video is going to seem all over the place, but trust me, I'm going somewhere. The reason this is top of mind for me is the recent news of a potential DJI drone ban, which is really near and dear to my heart. As somebody not just here on YouTube who uses drones for the YouTube channel, it really helped excel my career in construction. I do actually own a $4,300 DJI Mavic 3. This is the Enterprise Edition with the RTK module for drone mapping purposes. And I've also got a DJI Mini 4 Pro behind me, which I use for the YouTube channel. Aside from drones, just going back to the old days and how much legislation just in the last 60 years has changed dramatically. I can argue that legislators were bad at it when it was easier, and they are only getting worse as things get more complicated with more advanced technology. Let's start with the chicken tax. Back in the 60s, the US imposed a tax, 25% tariff, on imported light trucks from the European market. This was in retaliation to tariffs that were placed on exported chickens from the US. The chicken tax essentially eliminated foreign competition out of the US market and allowed domestic manufacturers to just dominate. However, this lack of competition led to complacency and less innovation. It left consumers with less options and to pay higher prices. Today, 60 years later, that chicken tax still exists. That 25% tariff is still in place, and it's still affecting consumers as of today. So who exactly benefited from this chicken tax? Let me know in the comments down below. What do you guys think? Is this something that should still exist? Next, let's look at Harley-Davidson. Back in 1983, Harley-Davidson, they were in rough shape. They were on the brink of bankruptcy, struggling to compete with Japanese motorcycle manufacturers on quality, price, all of the above. And they ultimately had Ronald Reagan step in and issue tariffs on any imported motorcycles over 700 cc's, specifically targeting the Harley-Davidson market. This really gave Harley-Davidson a lifeline to basically just have free reign in the US market. Now, at this specific time, Harley-Davidson was being bought back from AMF, which was more known for their bowling alleys than they were motorcycles. While this move certainly helped Harley-Davidson in the short term, it stifled competition, impacted consumer choice, and ultimately pricing. Another example of government intervention is with Tesla, the EVs. You know, going green sure does have its perks if you're Elon Musk. It really gave him the opportunity to play with his remote control airplanes and dig in his sandbox. But for people who bought a Tesla Model S Plaid a couple years ago for upwards of $130,000. Well, Tesla has since dropped prices. I think they're down below 100 grand now. On top of that, you also have around 50% depreciation that I've been seeing, sometimes more. These people picked up these vehicles in a market that was artificially propped up. And what happened was you had these $75,000 or $7,000 tax credits. It allowed manufacturers like Tesla and some others to sell vehicles that were more expensive because people were getting that free government money to subsidize that cost. And I don't feel that $7,500 or $7,000 tax credit offsets the $60,000 loss. So that whole market is in the midst of collapsing as I'm recording this video. It's another example of when government intervention steps in with a good intention and ultimately has a ripple effect that impacts us, the consumers, for years to come. Now, shifting focus over to racing. It's frustrating when legislators are legislating on things that they don't know much about. What's even more infuriating is when organizations, bureaucratic like the EPA, are creating rules to be followed. These EPA officials are not elected. They're not held accountable by voters. It's all with good intention, but it's also something where even the government itself isn't following its own regulation.
And this truck is special, not only because it belongs to the U.S. Air Force, but also factory delete plates from Ford. This thing has 0 emissions, no DPF.
It's just, again, it's a double standard that makes you question how they don't have to follow the rules that they're creating for the people. And it's very, the scales are tilted very heavily on the consumer and the government doesn't have to follow their own rules. Just kind of insane. So all of the things I've talked about so far have been really focused on product, manufacturing industry type stuff. The government restricts portions of this part of that industry. Where things in the last, say, 60 years have gotten dramatically different is technology. Huawei, they had sold phones for a short period of time, I'd say, comparatively in the US market. Chinese manufacturer, and there was some real concerns about espionage. So if you're selling technology, which is not only software but also hardware, how can that be deployed against an adversary? Is it a boogeyman that is created by lobbyists for larger companies in the US that are trying to prevent competitive sales from foreign companies? Or is it genuine, legitimate concerns for domestic homeland security? And that's where I start to look at things like Huawei. I don't know too much about, but again, just getting into it about, I think that was one of the first times in modern technology where the government came in, the US government, and said, foreign controlled tech company, hardware and software, we're done with it, and eliminated it from the US market. Now, we'll get to TikTok in a moment, but the one that I really wanted to talk about today is DJI drones. I'm not saying that there's no concern here, but I'm questioning the ban of these drones and how much it is likely to decimate the industry of construction survey, agriculture deploys these all the time, law enforcement, hobbyists. Drones have been around for well over a decade now, and they have become intertwined into very lucrative and critical industries. The government is starting to make the claim that these drones flying around can be gathering intel and sending it back over to China. I'm not going to discount that because, yeah, that sounds pretty darn terrifying. Let's say they ban DJI drones altogether. We have a massive data problem in the US. There is nothing preventing a US drone manufacturer, a US cell phone manufacturer, any US-based company, the automotive companies right now who are building an absurd amount of technology into vehicles, they all, for the most part, have some language in their agreements that nobody ever reads that says that they're allowed to sell your data to third parties. Well, once they sell that data to third parties, what is preventing that third party from turning around and selling it to another third party who then sells it to a foreign adversary? So you are not able anymore to really just take any one of these individual industries and ban a specific product to prevent the data getting to a foreign adversary. Going back to the Harley-Davidson, tying all this stuff back together, chicken tax still in place today. Those things prevent certain industries from even being in the market in the first place. Does nothing for data security. And this is really where the legislation, I think, has gotten some of these people who've been in these roles for 60 years, who have zero understanding of this stuff.
Even if Facebook doesn't earn money from selling data, doesn't Facebook earn money from advertising based on that data?
Yes, Congresswoman, we run ads. That's the business model is running ads.
How do you sustain a business model in which users don't pay for your service?
Senator, we run ads.
Banning the company, in my opinion, doesn't do anything to prevent the data from getting there. And the data is the commodity now, not the drone itself. So we, as a country, should be very, very seriously talking about consumer protection data laws, protecting us, the consumer, our data, which should be, at this point, it's basically an extension of our identity. And that is something where if we start addressing those issues, a lot of these other things can basically be addressed and picked up through some of that legislation. I tend to be a less government kind of person, less government the better. But if you're going to start legislating, the outcome sure as hell better be what you had intended and not just leave decades-long ripple effect of like what we're dealing with now, of still having lack of competition in the mid-size pickup truck segment over a chicken tax that is 60 years old. The whole idea of TikTok, I am not a huge fan of TikTok. I don't love short form content because it works too well. I am just as guilty as everybody else of doom scrolling through nonsense, and I just think that it's not great for the American attention span, if you want to call it that. But do I think that banning TikTok because the Chinese government can use it as a tool for propaganda? I'm a little conflicted on that one. The same way that the Huawei argument of like, hey, it's a physical device that people hold in their hands. It's both hardware and software with a direct tie to the Chinese Communist government. That one might be a little more cut and dry. TikTok, again, if you cannot root out the ability for any other platform to sell your data to a third party and give them all of that information, which can ultimately end up in the hands of an adversary anyways, what does banning TikTok even do? There's certainly some legislation to be had. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any, but I think our U.S. government needs to really focus on some consumer data protection laws that go a lot further to protect us as individuals, which by in turn will have an impact on these technologies and limit their ability for what they can do with the data for the products of which we are purchasing. So the lessons for me out of the chicken tax, Harley-Davidson tariffs, Tesla propping up that industry, is that while done with good intention, these moves tend to stifle innovation, decimate entire markets, and have decades-long repercussions that the initial intent did not have. And one thing we all know is that the U.S. government is terrible at doing things.
Of what nation are you a citizen?
Singapore.
Are you a citizen of any other nation?
No, Senator.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean. No.
Have you ever been associated or affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party?
No, Senator. Again, I'm Singaporean.
What they're even worse at doing is undoing things.
Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut down the machine! Shut it down!
Now, the even scarier thing is that a lot of these bans, I'm talking the DJI ban, are lumped into much bigger bills to pass through, and stuff like the DJI ban ends up just being the barnacle on the bottom of a much larger ship and is kind of taken out by their ability to just kind of lump things in and pass them through so that, say, I don't know, the government doesn't shut down, stuff like that. And a lot of times these things, they're not passing on their own individual merits. They're passing because of how they were lumped into other bills. And it's, in my opinion, it's dirty and it doesn't have the impact that it was intended to have in the first place. Just really starting to question a lot of how our government is going about impacting markets through legislation. And do we really have a free market, a capitalistic market, or is it all driven by boogeymen that are created by lobbyists who are funded by massive corporations to basically just cut out competition completely and have government funded or government supported monopolies? And that's what it starts to feel like to me. Let me know in the comments down below. Again, this is not meant to be a right versus left. Anytime I see a comment where it's like, this president is to blame, I feel like that is, again, not enough in the minutia behind who the people were presenting the bill, really getting to the root of the problem. It's not just the head of the snake that is the issue. With that being said, guys, it's a lot to unpack here, but I just wanted to share. I'm concerned with the DJI ban. I think it's kind of nonsense. I know a lot to unpack. That was kind of a lot of different thoughts to tie together, but the ultimate takeaway is that the government sucks at doing things, and we need to be very careful about what we support the government doing, and doing it with a lens of, again, using the past as an indicator of what's going to happen in the future. The government doesn't back things down. So once decisions are made, they're made, and they have decades-long implications. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. If this is your first time tuning in, please hit that subscribe button down below. Remember, likes go a long way to help support the channel. See you guys next time.